At the reading of the will, I learned my parents left me $0 while my sister got the house. I smiled, froze every account I controlled, and a month later Dad texted, "Property taxes are due." I replied, "Not my problem." I was sitting in the corner chair of the attorney's office. The kind of stiff, uncomfortable seat that makes you feel like you're already in trouble. My name's Oliver, I'm 29, and I had been bracing myself for this moment for weeks. The reading of my parents' will was supposed to be a formality. Something sad, yes, but straightforward. They'd always preached fairness, always said, we treat our kids equally. I believed them. I don't know why I still believe them. Maybe part of me wanted to cling to the idea that I hadn't been the black sheep all these years for nothing. My sister Claire strolled in late, looking like she owned the place. Designer coat, sunglasses perched on her head, even though it was raining outside. She gave me one of those tight smiles that felt more like a dare than a greeting. My stomach nodded. She'd been their favorite since day one. But this was about Mom and Dad, not her. I reminded myself of that over and over as the lawyer shuffled papers and cleared his throat. The first few minutes felt like white noise, formalities, legal jargon, the kind of thing you'd hear in a courtroom drama. Then came the big reveal. To our beloved daughter Claire, the lawyer read, "We leave the family home and its contents to be hers free and clear." My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Then, without so much as a pause, he continued, "To our son Oliver, we leave," and there it was. Nothing, just a line about no material assets That was it, no keepsake, no letter, no explanation, just zero. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or storm out, though I think everyone half expected me to. Instead, I smiled, a small, unsettling smile that made Claire's own smirk falter for just a second. I stayed silent while the lawyer finished, while Claire started talking about paint colors and renovations like she hadn't just won the lottery. The moment we left the office, she was already texting her husband, grinning ear to ear. I walked to my car, in the drizzle, hands shaking, but not from the cold. It wasn't just about the house. It was about every family dinner where I was the punchline. Every time my achievements were brushed off while Claire's smallest wins were celebrated like she'd cured a disease. It was about Dad bailing her out of debt more times than I could count while telling me to stand on my own 2 feet when I asked for a loan once, that I paid back early. It was about Mom bragging to neighbors about Claire's new car while barely remembering my job title. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. I wasn't angry, not the explosive kind. Anyway, I felt something colder, something sharper. See, I wasn't just a son they ignored. I was also the quiet one who'd been handling their joint accounts for the last 2 years. Ever since Dad's forgetfulness started making bills light, I had signing privileges, access to savings, to investments. I knew where every cent was, and suddenly, I knew exactly what to do with that information. Before I touched anything, I replayed the entire day in my head. Claire's smug face, Dad's relieved look when he heard I wasn't getting anything, like a burden had been lifted. The more I thought about it, the calmer I felt. No one had even looked at me when we left the office. Not one. "Are you okay?" Not even a pat on the back. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family. The next morning, I drove to the bank. The manager knew me by name, smiled as I came in. It took 20 minutes to revoke every automatic payment that ran through accounts I controlled. Another hour to freeze certain funds for verification. When I walked out, the air felt different, crisp, electric. For once, I wasn't the one sitting quietly while they decided what was fair. I didn't hear from anyone for a week. Then the text started, casual at first. "Hey, Dad says the utilities aren't auto-paying. Can you check?" I left it on read. A few days later, another mortgage payment bounced. "What's going on?" I said I'd look into it. By the third week, the tone shifted. "Oliver, property taxes are due. We need those funds released." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Not my problem." That was the first time I let myself really grin, and that was when things started to get interesting. The silence after my "not my problem" text didn't last long. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with Claire's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring out. She tried again, then left a voicemail I didn't bother listening to right away. I knew exactly how it would sound. That passive-aggressive sweetness she'd perfected over the years. The tone that implied she was doing me a favor by even talking to me. When I finally played it later that night, I was right. "Oliver," she began, dragging out my name like she was scolding a toddler. "Listen, I know this has been a big adjustment for you, but Mom and Dad trusted you with the finances because you're responsible. You can't just stop paying things because you're upset. The house is a family asset. This affects all of us, not just you. All of us." The audacity of that line almost made me laugh. The house wasn't a family asset anymore. It was hers, legally hers, thanks to that will. My share had apparently been whittled down to zero, but now I was supposed to keep funding her new life like nothing happened. The hypocrisy was so on brand it almost felt comforting. By the end of the week, the messages escalated. Dad finally texted me himself, which was rare. Usually, he had Mom or Claire do his talking for him. "This is getting ridiculous. he wrote. Taxes are due in 5 days. We can't afford late fees right now. Fix this. Fix this. As if I was the one who broke it. I stared at the words, feeling that cold calm settle over me again. Instead of replying, I turned off my phone and went for a walk. It was late, the streets quiet, and the cool night air helped me think. I didn't want to act out of pure spite. That was too easy, too reckless. I wanted to be deliberate, to make sure every move I made had weight. When I got home, I pulled up my emails. Buried under the usual bills and work memos were several notifications from the bank, all flagged as urgent. Overdraft warnings, declined auto payments, an alert that a credit line payment had bounced. I almost felt bad, almost. The next morning, I drove past the family house just to see what was happening on their end. Sure enough, Claire's SUV was parked out front next to a stack of unopened mail on the porch. The paint on the shutters was already starting to chip. Dad had been meaning to fix that for years, but never got around to it. I saw her through the window, pacing with her phone, probably yelling at some poor customer service rep. For a second, I thought about going up and knocking just to watch her face, but I decided against it. Let the tension simmer. That weekend, I got invited to a cousin's birthday dinner, the first family gathering since the will reading. Normally, I would have skipped it, but something told me I needed to show up this time, needed to be seen. When I arrived at the restaurant, the energy shifted immediately. Conversations hushed, and I could practically feel every eye on me. Claire was already there, sitting next to Mom, looking put together as ever. She gave me a little wave, her nails perfectly manicured, as if we were just two siblings having a minor disagreement. I sat at the other end of the table. For the first 20 minutes, nobody said a word to me. Then, over appetizers, Mom leaned across the table and said, "Oh well, can we talk about this after dinner? We really need to get this whole situation resolved." "What situation?" I asked evenly. "The one where you left me nothing, or the one where Claire's bills keep bouncing?" The table went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mom frowned like I'd just said something wildly inappropriate. "You don't have to be dramatic. You know this isn't personal." That was the moment I realized they still didn't get it. To them, this was just a hiccup, a little family drama to smooth over. They thought they could guilt me back into line, the way they always had. Claire jumped in then, trying to play mediator. "Oh well, we can work something out," she said, her voice dripping with faux patience. "I'm willing to let you stay involved with the finances, but you need to be reasonable. This isn't just about you. You're punishing Mom and Dad too." I set my fork down, took a slow sip of water, and said, "I'm not punishing anyone. I just stopped doing free labor for people who don't think I'm worth a single cent." Her face tightened, and for a brief moment, I saw the mask slip. She wasn't used to me talking back, wasn't used to me not playing the peacekeeper. Dinner ended early after that. People made excuses, saying they had early mornings or other plans. I didn't care. I made my point. As I left, Dad caught up to me in the parking lot. "Son, this is getting out of hand," he said, lowering his voice like we were conspirators. "Claire can't handle these bills on her own. You know that. Just get things back on track for now. We'll sort out the rest later." "Later, like when?" I asked. Because as far as I can tell, the will was the final word. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and muttered something about how lawyers overcomplicate things. It was almost funny. He still thought this was negotiable. Over the next couple of weeks, the pressure ramped up. Mom started calling daily, leaving voicemails about family unity and how disappointed she was in me. My aunt even called at one point, telling me I was being cruel and that Claire was under a lot of stress right now. The last straw came when I got an email from a contractor. Apparently, Claire had started renovations on the house and tried to put the deposit on one of the accounts I'd frozen. The email was a polite but firm notice that the payment had been declined. Attached was the estimate, nearly $30,000 for new floors, cabinets, and landscaping. That night, I got another text from Claire. "We need to meet tomorrow. This has gone far enough." I stared at it for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something in me knew this was the turning point, the moment where everything was going to shift from passive-aggressive texts to a full-on confrontation. And honestly, I was ready for it. The next day, I didn't bother dressing up for whatever meeting Claire had in mind. Jeans, hoodie, no effort. If she wanted me to take this seriously, she could have started by taking me seriously years ago. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed two things right away. A moving truck parked in the driveway and Claire's husband standing outside, giving instructions to two workers carrying furniture inside. At first, I thought maybe they were just moving some of their stuff from their apartment, but then I saw what they were carrying. My parents' old dining room table, the one we'd eaten at every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Sunday dinner when I was a kid. My table, or at least, that's what I'd always thought. I parked and walked up slowly, almost cautiously. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice even but sharp enough to make her husband flinch a little. Claire came out the front door, arms crossed, wearing that smug smile I'd seen too many times. "We're moving in," she said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "The house is mine now. Oliver. Might as well make it feel like home. I see that, I said, glancing at the table being carried inside. Guess Mom and Dad's stuff didn't even make it past the first month. Claire's face didn't change. We're donating what we don't want. It's for the best. A fresh start. I don't know why, but that line, what we don't want, hit me harder than anything else she'd said. These weren't just objects. They were pieces of my childhood, the couch I'd fallen asleep on during family movie nights, the bookshelf Dad had built by hand in the garage. They were just clearing it all out like it was trash. Did you at least ask Mom and Dad? I asked, my voice quieter now. Claire tilted her head. Ask them what? The will gave me the house and everything in it. They knew what they were doing. Honestly, Oliver, you're taking this way too personally. This is just logistics. Logistics. That was the moment something inside me snapped, though not in the way I expected. I didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't make a scene. I just stood there, watching as strangers carried out pieces of my family history, and I felt something cold settle into place. Fine, I said. Do what you want. It's your house now, right? But don't call me when the bills keep coming. I'm done. I turned to leave, but before I reached my car, Claire called after me. Oh, by the way, Dad mentioned you still have the keys to the lake cabin. He said to bring them by this week. We're taking over maintenance on that too. I froze. The cabin wasn't even part of the will. It was in a trust that Dad and I had both been managing. My name was still on every document, every account tied to it. The cabin isn't yours, I said, turning back slowly. Not yet, she replied, almost casually. But Dad's going to sign it over. He said there's no point in you keeping control when you're acting like this. And there it was, the betrayal clear as day. They weren't just content to cut me out of the house. They were going for everything, every shared asset, every connection I had to the family's history. They wanted me erased completely, rewritten as the bitter son who chose to walk away. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove off, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour, past neighborhoods I didn't recognize, until I finally pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there. That night, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail, but listened to it later. Her voice was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. Oliver, we've been talking, and we think it's best if Claire takes over managing the cabin too. This fighting isn't good for anyone. And honestly, we think some distance might help you figure out what's really important. Please bring the keys by before the end of the week. What's really important? The phrase made my stomach turn. They'd made their choice, and now they were trying to make it sound like it was for my own good. The next morning, I drove out to the cabin. It was early, mist still hanging over the lake, and the air was so still it almost felt wrong to breathe too loudly. I sat on the porch steps for a long time, thinking about all the summers we'd spent here, fishing with Dad, campfires with cousins, even the time Claire broke her arm falling off the dock, and everyone made me feel guilty for not watching her more carefully. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything smelled the same. Wood smoke, lake water, dust. I walked through each room slowly, almost like I was saying goodbye, and then I sat at the kitchen table and took out my phone. I had the power to transfer control of the trust funds with a few taps, to put every asset under Claire's name right there and then. Instead, I did something else. I changed the access codes, locked everything down tighter than it had ever been, and then I drove back to my apartment, parked my car, and waited. It didn't take long. By that evening, Claire was calling again, her voice sharp now, all pretense of civility gone. You changed the codes. The bank said you locked the trust. What is wrong with you? Do you have any idea how difficult you're making this for everyone? For everyone, or just for you? I asked, my voice steady. She hesitated, then said, Mom and Dad aren't going to put up with this. You're just digging yourself deeper. Good, I said. Let them try. I hung up before she could respond. My phone lit up again a few seconds later, then again, and again. I turned it off completely and sat back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since the will reading, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel like the overlooked son or the family scapegoat. I felt something else entirely, something dangerous. And I had a feeling things were about to get a lot worse before they got better. The calls didn't stop. They came morning, noon, and night. First from Claire, then from Mom, then from numbers I didn't recognize but could guess were aunts, uncles, maybe even Dad, borrowing a coworker's phone when I stopped answering his. At first, I left the phone on silent, let the missed calls stack up. But by the third day, the constant buzzing was getting to me. I shut the phone off completely and tossed it in a drawer. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the dark. The city outside my window kept humming along, cars passing, muffled voices from the street. But inside it was quiet. Too quiet. I couldn't shake the image of the house, the moving truck, the table being carried through the door like I'd never existed. The thought that my family, my own blood, had decided I was disposable gnawed at me until I felt hollow. It didn't help that the rest of my life started fraying at the edges too. I was late to work twice that week because I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning until sunrise. My manager pulled me aside on Friday and asked if I was okay, and I lied and said I was just tired. Even my friends noticed something was off. When I skipped game night for the third week in a row, my best friend texted, "Hey man, we miss you. You good?" I typed out 3 different replies before deleting them all and leaving him on read. How do you explain to someone that your entire family decided you were worth 0, and somehow, that hurts worse than if they'd left you a single insulting dollar? By the end of the month, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, the kind of heavy that pressed down on you when you were alone, too long. I tried to distract myself, threw myself into work, into cleaning, into anything that might make me feel like I was in control again. It didn't really work. Then came the letter, a real paper letter sent to my apartment. The envelope had my parents' return address, written in Mom's neat handwriting. Inside was a single page, typed, "Oliver, we've been patient. Your behavior is hurting this family. The cabin is no longer yours to control. We are in the process of transferring ownership to Claire legally, with or without your cooperation. You need to stop being difficult and think about the bigger picture. We hope you'll come to your senses and make this right before things get worse." Mom and Dad. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking by the 3rd pass. It wasn't even the words themselves. It was the tone, cold, businesslike, like I was some employee refusing to hand over company property. No acknowledgement of how I might be feeling, no attempt at understanding, just a warning. I put the letter on the counter and sat there, staring at it for what felt like an hour. That was my breaking point. Not anger, not even sadness, just this deep, hollow ache that I couldn't shake. My own parents had written me out of their lives so cleanly, it was like I'd never been there. That weekend, I drove out to the cabin again. Not because I had a plan, but because I didn't know where else to go. It was drizzling, the kind of thin, cold rain that soaked through your clothes before you realized it. The cabin was silent, exactly as I'd left it, but stepping inside felt different this time, heavier. I made a fire in the old stone fireplace, sat on the floor with my back against the couch, and just listened to the rain on the roof. For a long time, I didn't move. I thought about every fight, every family dinner where I was told to just let it go for the sake of peace. I thought about how many times I'd covered for Claire's mess-ups growing up. The time she crashed Dad's car and blamed me. The time she maxed out Mom's credit card, and somehow I got lectured about being more responsible with money. Somewhere between midnight and sunrise, something shifted. The ache was still there, but under it, there was this flicker of something else. Resolve. If they wanted to cut me out, fine, but I wasn't going to just sit quietly and let them take everything without a fight. Over the next week, I started putting things in motion, quietly, carefully. I contacted the bank and set up notifications for every attempt to access the trust, every attempted withdrawal. I met with a lawyer, a quiet, sharp man who listened more than he spoke. When I was done explaining everything, he nodded and said, "You have options." Those 3 words were enough to make me feel like I could breathe again. Back at work, I kept my head down, but people could tell something was changing. I wasn't smiling much, but I wasn't dragging myself through the day anymore either. At night, I stayed up late researching property law, trust management, tax implications. It wasn't revenge yet. Not exactly, but it was the first step toward reclaiming some control. Then one evening, while I was knee-deep in paperwork at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't been expecting, an alert from the bank. Someone had tried to authorize a transfer from one of the frozen accounts. I checked the details. It was Claire. She'd tried to move money for another renovation expense, probably thinking I'd cave by now. Instead of getting angry, I smiled, a real smile, because now I had proof. Documented, time-stamped proof, that she was trying to access funds she had no right to touch. I shut my laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't over, not even close. But, for the first time since the Wool reading, I felt something that almost felt like hope. Whatever they thought was going to happen next, they were about to find out just how wrong they were, and I was going to make sure of it. Carefully, patiently, and in a way they'd never see coming. The shift didn't happen overnight, but it was real. I could feel it in the way I carried myself, in the way I started looking people in the eye again. Something about sitting across from that lawyer had woken me up. For the first time since the will reading, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. I scheduled another meeting with the lawyer a week later, this time with a list of specific questions. He walked me through every option available to me, patiently explaining the steps I could take to reinforce my position as co-trustee of the cabin property, and how to formally document my refusal to authorize any transfer. He showed me how to file notices that would make it legally impossible for my parents or Claire to move anything without my signature. When I walked out of his office that day, I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally had a plan. The next month became about quietly building a life that wasn't dependent on my family's approval or drama. I picked up extra hours at work, partly to save more aggressively, partly because the distraction felt good. My manager noticed and, to my surprise, called me into his office one morning to tell me he was impressed. "You've really stepped up lately," he said. "We've got a lead position opening soon. Think you'd be interested?" I nodded, hiding how fast my heart was beating. A lead position meant a raise, better benefits, and more control over my schedule. It also meant that, for the first time, I wouldn't have to think twice about covering my own expenses or about freezing anyone else's. Outside of work, I started treating the cabin as my own sanctuary. Every Friday after work, I drive out there, bring groceries, light a fire, and spend the weekend in the quiet. It became my reset button. No calls, no family drama, just me and the sound of the lake at night. I started cleaning it up too, fixing the loose steps on the porch, oiling the hinges that had been squeaky for years, patching the screen door myself. Something about caring for the place with my own two hands felt almost defiant, like I was saying, "This is mine too. You don't just get to erase me from this." Then came the first real turning point. My lawyer called me one afternoon with an update. The paperwork I'd filed to block the cabin transfer had gone through successfully. Any attempt to reassign the property without my consent would now be flagged legally. When I got off the phone, I laughed out loud for the first time in months. Not just a small laugh, either, but a full, unguarded laugh that startled even me. For once, I wasn't the one being blindsided. I was holding the cards. That weekend, I drove to the cabin again, this time with a box of supplies. New locks, new deadbolts, even a keypad entry system I'd splurged on. I spent the entire day installing everything, making sure every door and window had fresh security measures. When I was done, I stood on the porch, sweaty and covered in sawdust, and felt an incredible sense of peace. No matter what they tried next, they couldn't just walk in and take it. Meanwhile, my life in the city kept improving. I got the promotion at work and a decent raise to go with it. My coworkers took me out to celebrate, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was dragging a cloud of family drama into every conversation. Even my social life picked back up. I started going to game nights again, started saying yes to dinner invites instead of making excuses. People noticed the difference. One of my friends joked that I looked 10 pounds lighter and asked if I'd been working out, and maybe I had. Not in the gym, but in the sense that every decision I made now felt like a rep strengthening something inside me. Then one Tuesday morning, I got a text from the bank. Another attempt had been made to access the frozen accounts. But this time, instead of just declining it, I had my lawyer draft a formal notice to Claire, warning her that continued attempts would constitute financial misconduct. He CC'd my parents on the email. The silence that followed was almost deafening. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear a single word from anyone. No calls, no letters, no guilt-tripping voicemails. It was bliss, but I knew better than to think they'd given up. Sure enough, the calm broke on a Saturday afternoon when Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. She stood there holding a Tupperware of lasagna, of all things, like this was just a casual visit. "Can I come in?" she asked, smiling like we hadn't been at war for months. I let her in, but said nothing, just waited. She sat at my kitchen table, placed the lasagna down, and sighed. "Oh well, this has gone far enough," she said gently. "You've made your point, but we can't keep living like this. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Claire's been crying constantly. Cry me a river." I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked at me, surprised, then continued. "We all just want to move on from this. If you'd release the funds and agree to let Claire handle the cabin, we could put this behind us." There it was, the real reason for the visit. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I'd jumped through hoops for that woman, desperate for a scrap of approval. But now, all I felt was a strange calm. "No," I said simply. She stared at me like she couldn't quite process what she'd just heard. "No, that's right," I said. "No to releasing the funds. No to giving up the cabin. No to pretending any of this is fine." For a long moment, we just sat there in silence. Then she stood, her face tight, and without another word, she left. When the door shut behind her, I exhaled slowly and felt something click into place. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing to draw a line, to stop playing the dutiful son who kept the peace at his own expense. And I had a feeling that line I'd drawn was about to set the stage for everything that came next. Because if my family thought I was done just because I'd stopped answering calls, they were about to find out how much more I was capable of when I finally decided to fight back on my terms. The weekend after Mom's visit, I drove out to the cabin again. Partly because I needed to clear my head. Partly because I'd started thinking of it less as a family retreat and more as a home base. The leaves had started to turn, and the whole place looked like something out of a postcard. Gold and red reflections rippling across the lake. The smell of damp earth in the air. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and my laptop, scrolling through property records and trust documents. It had become a kind of ritual by now, something grounding. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A clause in the trust that stated if one trustee was unwilling to participate in good faith management, the other trustee could petition for sole authority. My parents must have assumed I'd never notice, but there it was, in black and white. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer first thing Monday. He leaned back in his chair as I explained what I'd found, a slow smile spreading across his face. "If they keep pushing," he said, "you could absolutely make a case that they're the ones acting in bad faith. especially if you've got proof of unauthorized withdrawal attempts. He tapped the folder of bank records I brought, which you do. The idea of becoming the sole trustee was tempting, more tempting than I wanted to admit, not because I wanted to keep the cabin forever, but because I wanted the choice to be mine, not theirs. I wanted to take back every ounce of control they tried to strip from me that week. I also started talking to a financial advisor. I'd never bothered before, figuring my savings were fine where they were, but now I wanted everything airtight. We set up a separate account, one only I could access, and I moved my personal savings and investments there. I also changed every password, every PIN, every security question tied to anything remotely connected to my finances. Each step felt like another brick in a wall I was building between myself and the chaos my family thrived on. Then came the email that turned everything from defense into offense. It was from a former neighbor of my parents, someone I hadn't talked to in years, who'd heard about the situation through the grapevine. "Hey Oliver," the email began. "I don't mean to stir the pot, but I thought you should know. Claire's been telling everyone at church that you stole money from the family accounts. She said you drained them out of spite and left them high and dry. People are starting to talk." I read it 3 times, my pulse pounding in my ears. She wasn't just trying to take everything from me privately. She was smearing my name publicly. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the bank statements and email notifications I'd been collecting for months. I realized I didn't just have proof that I hadn't stolen anything. I had a complete paper trail showing every single time Claire had tried to take money she wasn't entitled to. For the first time, I saw the possibility of using it. I called my lawyer again, told him about the rumors, and asked what my options were. "If they're defaming you," he said carefully, "you could send a cease and desist, or if you want to push harder, you could pursue damages, especially since you have financial losses tied to this." Damages. The words sat heavy in my mind, but not in a bad way. Meanwhile, work continued to go well. The raise from my promotion hit my account for the first time, and I paid off the last of my student loans in one go. I stood in my kitchen after making that payment, staring at the confirmation email, and felt something uncoil in my chest. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely debt-free, independent in every way that mattered. I decided to channel that momentum. I started fixing up the cabin more seriously, not just repairs, but improvements. New lighting fixtures, fresh coats of paint, even a used kayak I found for sale online. It wasn't just about making it nicer, it was about claiming it, shaping it into something that reflected me instead of my parents' hand-me-down taste. One Friday evening, as I was hauling lumber out of the back of my car for a small deck project, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another attempted withdrawal. This time, it wasn't Claire, it was Dad. I froze, staring at the screen. And then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. It wasn't just Claire anymore. Dad had finally decided to get his hands dirty. And that, ironically, made my case even stronger, because now I could prove that both trustees were acting without my consent. I forwarded the alert to my lawyer with a simple message: "Let's move forward." That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I spent the next few weeks quietly gathering everything I might need. Every email, every text, every voicemail, every failed withdrawal attempt. I had them organized into folders, labeled and timestamped. I even transcribed some of the more incriminating voicemails where Claire outright admitted to needing the money for renovations, as though it were hers by right. The next time Mom called, I actually answered. "Oliver," she said. Clearly surprised, I picked up. "We need to sit down and have a serious talk about." "We will," I cut in, my tone even, "but not until I have my lawyer present, and not until I've reviewed the last few months of account activity with him. You might want to do the same." There was a long pause on the other end. "Are you threatening us?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I'm giving you a heads up." When I hung up, I felt that same cold calm I'd felt in the lawyer's office months ago, but stronger now, sharper, because now I wasn't just defending myself, I was setting the stage, and soon enough, they were going to realize just how much power I had and how careful I'd been with it. I didn't rush the next step. That was the key. If I'd learned anything from months of being pushed, prodded, and baited, it was that patience was my greatest weapon. Revenge wasn't about an explosion. It was about a slow, precise strike that left no room for misunderstanding. The first move came through my lawyer. He drafted and delivered a formal notice to my parents and Claire, stating that any further attempts to access the trust without my consent would be documented as a breach of fiduciary duty. A legal term that sounded dry, but the implications were huge. It meant that if they kept going, I could petition not just for sole control of the cabin, but for financial restitution. Within 2 days, I got a flurry of calls. Claire, first, her voice tight, brittle, on the edge of snapping. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "You got a lawyer involved over a cabin?" "Not over a cabin," I said calmly. "Over months of unauthorized financial activity and slander. But yes, the cabin's included." "You're unbelievable," she shot back. "Mom and Dad are furious. You're tearing this family apart." "No," I replied. I'm just refusing to keep pretending everything's fine while you all walk all over me. Then I hung up. The next call was from Dad. Later that evening, his tone was different, controlled, almost eerily calm, which I knew meant he was angrier than Claire had been. Son, he said, this is family business. Dragging lawyers into it was a mistake. If this escalates, you're going to regret it. Maybe, I said, letting the silence stretch. But so will you. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth on the other end. When he finally spoke again, he said, you always were dramatic. I didn't reply, just let the silence hang until he hung up first. After that, everything went quiet for a while. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It felt strange at first, like the calm before a storm. And then one morning, I got an email from my lawyer. My petition for sole control of the trust had been filed and accepted for review. That was when I decided to go one step further. I compiled everything, the bank alerts, the voicemails, the screenshots of texts, the letter they'd sent threatening to transfer the cabin without my consent into a single file. I wrote a short, clear statement at the top. This is a complete record of my family's attempt to remove me from shared assets and spread false rumors about my character. Then I sent it to every single extended family member who had reached out to scold me or pressure me over the last few months. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. The responses started trickling in that afternoon. Some were stunned. I had no idea. I can't believe they did this. Others were less sympathetic, telling me to keep it private, but I ignored those. By the end of the week, the gossip network that Claire had used against me had turned against her. I started hearing from cousins who told me she'd been crying to anyone who would listen, claiming I'd made her look bad. That Friday, I drove to the cabin, as usual. I brought my laptop, my new documents, and a bottle of good whiskey. I sat on the porch, watching the sun go down over the lake, my phone buzzing every few minutes with new notifications. Messages from relatives, from neighbors, even from people I barely knew, all taking my side. Then, just after dark, my phone buzzed again. A text from Claire. You win. Are you happy now? I stared at it for a long moment before replying. I'm not looking to win, Claire. I just wanted you all to see that you can't cut me out of everything and still expect me to clean up your messes. Her reply came fast. You ruined my reputation. Everyone's talking about me. No, I wrote back. You ruined your own reputation. I just showed people the truth. And then I turned my phone off for the night. The following Monday, my lawyer called with the news I'd been waiting for. Based on the documentation of unauthorized withdrawal attempts, the court had granted my petition. I was now the sole trustee of the cabin property. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. I just sat there in my apartment, staring at the paperwork in my hands, feeling a quiet, deep satisfaction settle over me. The next day, I sent a single email to my parents and Claire with the attached legal order and a short note. The matter is resolved. Please direct all future communications about the cabin to me directly. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But that weekend, when I drove to the cabin, I noticed something strange. The porch light was on. For a second, I tensed. Had they tried to get in again? I unlocked the door and stepped inside, heart pounding, but everything was exactly as I'd left it. Then, I saw it. A single envelope sitting on the kitchen table. No name, no note, just a check inside for the exact amount of the overdue property taxes. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, then set it aside and made a fire in the fireplace. This wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was acknowledgement. And maybe, just maybe, the first sign that they finally understood I wasn't someone they could control anymore. And if they didn't understand yet, well, I had plenty more ways to remind them. Because for the first time, I wasn't scared of losing my family. I was starting to wonder if they were scared of losing me. And honestly, they should be. When I came back from the cabin that Sunday evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't just about winning legal control. It was about finally reclaiming my own peace of mind. But the fallout didn't take long to arrive, and it came harder than I expected. By Monday morning, I woke up to find over a dozen messages waiting for me from Mom, Dad, even Claire. The tone had changed completely. Gone was the righteous fury, the self-importance, the patronizing guilt trips. Now it was quiet panic. Mom's message was the longest. Oliver, we just got the paperwork. We didn't think it would go this far. Your father is not well right now. He's upset. He says the family is falling apart. Please, can we meet and talk privately? No lawyers. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a shower, made myself coffee, and drove to work. By the time I got to my desk, there were 3 more messages from Claire. Short, frantic ones. People won't stop asking me questions. Dad blames me for this. He won't even look at me. You've made your point. Okay, are you happy now? I didn't reply to those either. I wasn't interested in gloating or trading jabs anymore. The point had never been revenge just for revenge's sake. It was about balance, about making sure they understood I wasn't the punching bag anymore. The next weekend, I agreed to meet them, not at the family house, not at the cabin, but at a neutral coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, they were already seated. Mom looked tired, older than she had a few months ago. Dad sat stiffly, arms crossed, his jaw set like he was holding back everything he wanted to say. Claire had sunglasses on, even though we were inside, probably to hide that she'd been crying. "Oh well," Mom said softly, like she was approaching a wild animal. "We just want to talk." I sat down, calm and quiet, and waited. It was Dad who spoke first. "You embarrassed us," he said flatly. "Dragged our name through the mud with the entire family. Claire can't even show her face at church right now." I didn't flinch. "Good. Maybe now you all know how it feels to be on the outside." "That's not the same," Claire snapped, pushing her sunglasses up onto her head. "You could have just come to me. Instead, you went nuclear. You went nuclear first," I said evenly. "You cut me out of the will. You tried to take the cabin behind my back. You told everyone I stole from you. Don't act shocked when I refuse to keep playing along." Mom put a hand on Claire's arm before she could reply. "Oliver," she said carefully, "we made mistakes. I see that now. We should have handled things differently." That caught me off guard. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to decide if she was being sincere. "Do you know what it felt like?" I said slowly. "To sit in that lawyer's office and hear that I got nothing, not even a letter, not even a token keepsake. Do you know what it's like to walk out of that room and realize your parents just told you you're worth zero?" Mom's face crumpled, and for once, she didn't have a quick answer. "You didn't just leave me out of the will," I continued. "You made it clear that I was never really part of this family the way Claire was. So yeah, I froze the accounts. Yeah, I got a lawyer, and I'd do it again." For the first time since this all started, Dad didn't argue. He just looked away, staring out the window, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. Finally, Mom spoke again. "We can't undo the will," she said quietly, "but we can make things right moving forward. We want to settle things with you formally. No more behind-your-back decisions. No more assumptions." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was the closest I was ever going to get. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Slowly, awkwardly, but undeniably. Claire stopped trying to access accounts and even sent me a short, stiff message acknowledging my role as trustee. My parents stopped calling every time a bill was due and started handling their own finances, something they hadn't done in years. Extended family members who had taken Claire's side at first reached out to me, some to apologize, some just to say they'd been wrong. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. The truth was out there now, and everyone could see it for themselves. A month later, I hosted my first gathering at the cabin. Not a family event, not yet, but a few close friends. We grilled on the deck, played music, and kayaked out on the lake under the sunset. At one point, I stood on the porch with a drink in my hand and looked around at the life I was building, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. That night, as my friends packed up to leave, my phone buzzed with a single new message. It was from Dad. "Taxes were paid on time this year. Thanks for handling things." I stared at it for a long time before replying with 2 words. "You're welcome." And as I locked up the cabin and stood on the porch, watching the moon rise over the lake, I realized something. They might never fully understand what they'd put me through, but they understood enough to stop underestimating me, enough to treat me like someone who couldn't just be erased. For the first time, I wasn't just part of the family out of obligation. I was part of it on my own terms. And that was the moment I knew I'd finally found my place, not just in the cabin, but in my own life.